three bank robbers disappeared from Alcatraz prison.
The greatest prison break in history became America's most notorious cold case.
We've had no leads, zero leads for 50-plus years.
The escape from Alcatraz in 1962 forced the government into a merciless manhunt.
The escape was a huge embarrassment. The FBI was relentless.
And it put an unknown Florida family into the national spotlight.
We couldn't do anything without the FBI showing up, asking questions.
They bugged every one of our phones.
It was a terrible thing for our family.
Until they ultimately went into self-imposed exile. But now, the Anglin family is finally ready to share their secrets.
We have some items that will prove that those boys were alive at least until 1975.
It's almost kind of like getting the blessing, go solve this mystery.
Never seen anything like that before in my life.
And possibly solve this infamous case.
Director Harlow?
I never believed that this would happen.
People are going to be shocked at what they see.
Washington, D.C. Former United States Marshal Art Roderick receives a breathtaking phone call.
Art Roderick, can I help you?
This is Ken Widener, the nephew of John and Clarence Anglin.
The family of two of the three escaped prisoners in the 1962 Alcatraz escape is reaching out to the former marshal, and for the very first time, offering their assistance with this legendary cold case. For the one-time lead investigator of the Alcatraz escape, the surprise development is a shocking potential break in a half-century-old mystery.
Law enforcement had been in touch with the family since the escape occurred in 1962. It has tried over the decades to get cooperation from them, and it has never happened up to this point.
We're finally ready to hear what we know of the Alcatraz escape, the Marshal Service. We're ready to put this case to bed.
When it opened in 1934, Alcatraz housed the most infamous, high-risk criminals of its day.
Doors open to Al Capone as Machine Gun Kelly served the life term with no pals to aid him.
And was the most feared penitentiary in America. Touted as inescapable by officials, Alcatraz captured the public's imagination. And as the years passed, the rock's mythology grew. But in 1962, the unthinkable happens. Brothers John and Clarence Anglin, along with Frank Morris, pull off an ingenious escape, disappearing into the night.
The escape triggered the greatest manhunt in San Francisco's history.
With each passing day, the national scrutiny grew, shaming J. Edgar Hoover and his Federal Bureau of Investigation.
It was a big embarrassment for the FBI. That was Hoover's baby. And they did not want people to believe that they made it out of there.
Ken and David Widener are the nephews of Alcatraz escapees John and Clarence Anglin.
When I was a kid growing up, we couldn't do anything without the FBI showing up, asking questions.
As the feds insisted that the fugitive trio more than likely drowned in San Francisco's bay, they were simultaneously pursuing their manhunt with reckless abandon.
The FBI, they followed them. They bugged every one of our phones. They come into my grandmother's living room, demand that everybody stay where they're at until they answer all their questions.
The FBI harassed the family so bad because they thought that, somebody knew something.
We don't trust the FBI, and we do not trust the Marshal Services for that very reason.
Now, 5 decades removed from the escape, and after poring over their family's prodigious archives, the brothers believe they have unearthed evidence that may answer the question of what happened to their uncles. To this day, it is widely believed that the three escapees made it out of the prison alive, but never made it out of the treacherous water.
Well, we have some items that I think will prove to everyone that those boys were alive at least until 1975.
We're not doing this for the fame. We're not doing this for the money. We're doing this to prove that they actually did get off that island. They actually did survive that crossing. It's very possible they're still alive today.
To help pursue their evidence, the brothers have reached out to retired Marshal Art Roderick, well known to the Anglin family as a fair and balanced investigator.
Art Roderick worked on this case for a long time. It consumed his life for 25 years, just like it consumed ours.
We have information that I know he's going to find very interesting, and I think between the two of us, we can probably solve this case.
The Widener brothers have asked Roderick to meet them in Ruskin, Florida, just south of Tampa, hometown of the Anglin brothers.
This is the first actionable lead we've had in this entire case in 53 years, so we have to move on it.
Hard to believe we're going to meet a retired marshal.
You know, he's going to probably be freaking out a little bit to be out in the middle of nowhere. He's going to wonder what is really up.
But you know, I believe we've got an answer for that, because I want him to see, you know, hey, this is the Anglin family cemetery. I mean, this is where all of them are buried at. It's a good place to start this journey at. It's right there in front of Grandma and Granddaddy's grave. It's almost kind of like getting the blessing. Go solve this mystery.
Yes.
The mystery surrounds the whereabouts of their two fugitive uncles, John and Clarence, who, along with their older brother Alfred, robbed an Alabama bank in 1958 using a toy gun. After multiple escape attempts in Atlanta Federal Penitentiary and at Leavenworth, John and Clarence were sent to the Rock and requested to be housed near one another. But a strongly worded cautionary note from the associate warden at Leavenworth advised against such a situation. Yet the warden of Alcatraz, Paul Madigan, dismissed the warning, believing that Alcatraz was inescapable, and placed the brothers in neighboring cells. The Primitive Baptist Church and Cemetery. An interesting setting for the first meeting between the Anglin family and the United States government.
This is it, right here. This is where we're going to be meeting you. Hard to believe this is where all the Anglins are buried.
All but two.
I know it would definitely be good for our mom and Aunt Merle. It would be closure for them. Why we didn't start this 25 years ago, it wasn't time. It's definitely time now.
For my Aunt Merle and my mom, they will know before they pass away what really happened to their brothers.
Yep, this is it. Grandma and Granddaddy.
Wow. I wish that what we're going to show the marshal, that we could show her. You sure we can trust this man?
No, I'm not sure.
Art?
Gentlemen,
David Widener.
good to finally see you.
How you doing?
Art, Ken Widener, nice to meet you.
Good to meet you. Good to meet you guys.
Well, you know, we asked you to come out here because you look around, this is where all of the Anglin family are buried. Our grandmother, our grandfather, we've got uncles buried here, we have aunts buried here. All of the Anglin families are buried here except for two people. We want to be able to bring them back to this cemetery and bury them here with their family.
Well, I mean, a lot of people have different theories. My theory is they never got out of the water. I don't think they made it.
We don't believe that.
Yeah, we don't believe that for a minute. What do they have today to show me that my uncles did not make it across? What do they have? They have nothing.
Take it from our perspective that we have never seen anything to say that they made it out of the water. We're working from that premise right there.
Well, I'll tell you what we're fixed to show you might help us get our uncles back here where they're supposed to be.
We're about to give you a new lead.
Okay,
We'd like to show it to you.
lead the way.
Let's go.
Got a couple of things that you might be interested in. What we have here is some Christmas cards from the boys. And as you can tell, every one of these cards has been marked and read as they left the prisons. That one.
Okay, and that's their number there, right?
That is their prison
25034.
number. Exactly. Our family received Christmas cards starting in 1962 that just showed up in the mailbox, had not been through the post office. They're also signed by John and Clarence. Guess what? There's no markings.
Well, they're saying these two came after the escape.
Exactly.
Post-escape.
Ruskin, Florida. For the first time in 53 years, the family of Alcatraz escapees John and Clarence Anglin is sharing evidence with the United States government to try and find out what happened to the brothers after they escaped from the Rock in 1962.
Got a couple of things that you might be interested in. What we have here is some Christmas cards from the boys that just showed up in the mailbox, had not been through the post office.
And you're saying these two came after the escape.
Exactly.
That's correct. Every year, no matter where they were, John and Clarence always sent Christmas cards. For 3 years after their escape, my grandmother and grandfather continued to get cards. Signed, John and Clarence.
Well, yeah, the problem is it's hard to verify. These came after the escape in 62. I mean, I know you're telling me this,
Right.
but, you know, you got to show me something better than you just telling me that they showed up in the mailbox in 62, 63, and 64.
Yeah,
We
actually do have something else.
Okay, all right.
So, I want to start off and I want to show you something. 1992, a friend of the family gave us this photograph.
That's her comparison there.
Those two men look familiar to you?
I think that Art thought that he was probably wasting his time coming down to talk to us, but once I handed him that picture, I think a light bulb went off in his head.
I got a photograph that might help jog your
So
memory.
he's saying those are your uncles right there.
Look at that photograph there,
Yeah.
and look at that photograph there, and you tell me.
Are you surprised?
Yeah, yes, I'm surprised. My mind's already flowing. I basically didn't even hear what they were saying to me after I saw that stuff. And I'm thinking immediately, what are we going to do here?
For the lawmen, the picture could prove revelatory. If it withstands forensic analysis, everything we've known about the 1962 escape would be turned on its head.
They're always wanting to say these boys didn't make it. They drowned, they got washed out to sea. Well, this picture proves differently. This is what they've been looking for a long time.
I would like to take this stuff out to Northern California and meet with Mike Dyke, who's the active case agent.
Oh, we know Mike Dyke, and we don't trust him.
This material is not leaving our possession.
Okay.
So we're going with you.
Okay.
Michael Dyke has been the lead investigator on the Alcatraz escape for the last 12 years, a case that remains open for the U.S. Marshals Service.
Every case is open until we close it by either arrest or someone reaches the age of 99 or the court decides to dismiss the warrant. If we did find them, they would be still arrested because they still, believe it or not, owe time to the government.
Dyke's single greatest lead in the Alcatraz case are bones that washed up in San Francisco Bay 9 months after the escape. Statistical records show that 2 out of every 3 people who go missing in San Francisco Bay will eventually be found, which leads Dyke to a possible conclusion in his case.
These bones were believed to possibly be one of the escapees, but never could be proven because of DNA evidence at the time.
In 2010, Dyke tested family DNA from the 3rd escapee, Frank Morris, against the washed-up bones, but his efforts proved inconclusive.
About the same time I started working on DNA reference samples for the Morris family, I also contacted members of the Anglin family. I did have a face-to-face meeting with them in 2012, and they flat out refused to provide a reference sample.
No. No and hell no. We told Marshal Dyke that we would be willing to do it only if we could do it on our terms, and he didn't like that.
The Anglin family has had this long, drawn-out period of mistrust, mostly because of the way they feel that they were treated by the FBI at the time of the escape. The FBI was very aggressive in their investigation at the time because, it was a very big deal. I've been very generous as far as not bothering them very much at all.
I know he's trying to close this case, but he wants to close it on his terms. He wants to be the hero. Well, guess what? He's not going to be the guy that saved the day. He's not going to get anything unless we give it to him.
Art, Ken, and David arrive in the Bay Area, minutes away from a meeting with Marshal Dyke. For the brothers, who've had years of run-ins with the Marshal, entering Dyke's office is like walking into enemy territory. And they have no idea how he will react to their new evidence.
What do you think? What do you think's going to happen today?
I'm a little apprehensive about this, I'm going to be honest with you. Because if he tries to grab what we have and cut us out of this, I'm not going to be very happy about it.
He could legally do that, but I think the difference is you're cooperating with us now. I think he's gonna have a different tune when we sit down at this meeting.
My biggest fear is that he wants to close the case and him be the cowboy to save the day.
How you doing, Art? How you doing?
Good to see you, man.
Andy, how you doing?
Good to see you again.
Good to see you again. David, good to see
How you doing? Good to see you.
Come on in the office over here.
Mike, as you're very familiar with this case, it's 53 years old. The difference is now is that we have the cooperation of the family, which wasn't there before.
I appreciate that. That's what I've been looking for. I recovered those bones about 5 years ago, and I've been just looking for any samples I can get to compare it to either Morris or the Anglin brothers. So I really appreciate any help you can give me on it.
Well, we know you want the DNA. You've been trying to get it for 2 or 3 years now. We got something we want. We would like to have Alfred exhumed to find out how he died. Alfred is another key to what really happened to John and Clarence.
Brothers David and Ken Widener are the nephews of Alcatraz escapees John and Clarence Anglin. They are meeting with United States Marshal Michael Dyke, lead investigator of the Alcatraz case, and have just asked the marshal to exhume the body of another uncle, Alfred, a brother to the legendary escapees.
I've been wanting this answer since I was a kid.
Alfred Anglin is John and Clarence Anglin's brother. All three of them robbed a bank in Columbia, Alabama in 1958. John and Clarence ended up in Alcatraz. Alfred ended up serving concurrent state time in Alabama Penitentiary. A little bit more than a year after the Alcatraz escape, Alfred tried an escape of his own. He and another inmate gathered some tools, hacksaw blades, and were able to saw at some bars and climbed out the window. And there was a high voltage power line there. He accidentally hit the high voltage line and electrocuted himself to death. That is the official cause of death. A coroner did do an inquiry, and they couldn't find any other evidence of death other than electrocution.
It didn't happen the way they said it happened. We don't believe that.
Uncle Robert went down and he ID'd the body. And the funeral director told him this man had not been electrocuted. He had been beaten to death.
My mom and dad was the last ones to see Alfred alive. When they visited him in Kilby Prison in 1963 at Christmas, he told them, I know where they're at. I'm coming up for parole. When I get out, I'm going to meet them. 11 days later, he was dead.
The shocking revelation from Alfred that he knew his brothers not only survived the water crossing at Alcatraz, but were living somewhere as free men, is the reason the Anglin family believes a vast government conspiracy has been forever at play.
In the family's mind, they had that table bugged, and they knew that he knew where they were. And the family really believes that they beat him to death, trying to get him to tell them where them boys were.
For David and Ken, there's only one way to resolve their family's long-standing questions.
I'm proposing to them, if they dig Alfred up and find out how he really died, then they can have the DNA from Alfred. We want the truth.
We can make arrangements to have Alfred exhumed and an autopsy done on him. And they can look and see if there's a cause of death other than electrocution.
Sounds like a plan.
The exhumation of Alfred Anglin, I think, solves two things. I mean, number one, we're going to get great DNA samples. The most actionable lead that the Marshal Service has right now is the bones that washed up on the beach back in '63. And up to this point, the family has not made available any DNA to be compared to the sample that they have from the bones that they discovered. Number two, if we do find some trauma to the body that looks like he was beaten to death, then obviously that's going to be big news. I mean, it's a homicide case. Might be 52 years old, but it's still a homicide case. Any connection to the Anglin family at all and any connection back to Alcatraz is going to be big news.
With the deal in place, it's time for David and Ken to present their new evidence to the active marshal.
Well, I'm sure that you've heard all the stories and you know that the family received some Christmas cards after the escape.
I have heard that, and I'd love to see those if you have them.
Well, I would like to show you.
Okay.
They did not come in an envelope. They were placed in the mailbox. Do you think the handwriting looks similar?
John's name is really close. And so is Clarence's name. But, you know, handwriting's a lot more than just looking at letters or spacing. There's pen pressure. There's a lot of different things involved with handwriting samples. But is there a way to prove that these came after the escape? That's what I would be really interested in finding out. So,
yeah, the only thing I figured was possibly looking at when the cards were made.
Yeah.
We also have some other items.
These items were given to the family in 1992 by a family friend that actually grew up with the brothers, John and Clarence. And in 1975, he took this photograph. Thought maybe you might be interested in that one.
Yes, I am.
Inside the secure walls of San Francisco's Federal Building, the lead investigator on the Alcatraz escape case, U.S. Marshal Michael Dyke, has just seen something that may prove incredible.
Thought maybe you might be interested in that one.
Yes, I am.
Brothers David and Ken Widener are the nephews of 2 of the 3 Alcatraz escapees and are showing the Marshal family evidence that they say is their uncles, John and Clarence Anglin, alive years after the 1962 escape.
You think you recognize them?
They look like they could possibly be John and Clarence.
In 1975.
We put together another series of photographs that does some comparisons with their Alcatraz and some of the family photographs. And you can see in Clarence, you look at the hairline is exactly the same to all of his photographs, including his mugshot in Alcatraz. You look at his jawline, exactly the same.
And there's a lot of similarities here.
And that was 1975.
And then who gave you the photo? The family friend, you said, gave you the photo, right?
Yes.
Now, when they sent you the photo, did they claim it was John and Clarence?
Yes.
They did claim that, okay. And they say where the photo was taken?
Brazil.
Brazil?
On their farm that they own.
Okay.
Which is very interesting because in the early 90s, I took a phone call from a male who relayed basically that story to me.
He saw them in Brazil?
He saw them in Brazil on a farm.
Okay.
But at that point in time, it really wasn't actionable enough.
Okay.
But that phone call always stuck in my head all these years.
Okay. I've had a lot of photos sent to me from various people everywhere, and I've never seen this photo, just so you know.
Well, we actually have some other photographs.
Do you? I'd love to see them. Anything you have is always helpful.
How about a picture of their farm?
Same color soil. And this does not look like American, like the electricity pole and everything does not look like American. The family friend, you said, gave you the photo. Obviously, you have his name.
That is Fred Breezy. Fred Breezy, he was a family friend of the boys growing up.
Fred Breezy grew up with the brothers. They actually lived on a river called the Alcatraz River. So as children, Fred and John and Clarence and Alfred, they all played together out in the water, swimming, cutting up, so he grew up with them.
As Breezy and the Anglin boys grew into men, the family claims they all remained friends, even as the Anglins took to a life of crime, spending time in the federal penitentiary system. In 1992, 30 years after the Alcatraz escape, their childhood friend unexpectedly reached out to the Anglin family, asking for a meeting. And when he arrived at the family compound, Breezy shared a wild, sensational story with the entire Anglin clan.
In 1975, he went down to Brazil, and he went to a bar right outside of Rio. He said he had just sat down, and all of a sudden, he said an American came into the bar, and he went, "My God, I know that man."
And he said, the guy got up, walked to the bathroom, and he stopped him.
He said, "John."
Do you remember me?
John turned around and looked at him and said,
"Yeah, you look familiar."
He said, "I'm Fred Breezy." And he said, John went, Oh, my God.
Breezy told the family that after their escape from Alcatraz, the Anglin brothers had become farmers in the Brazilian countryside and allowed their longtime friend to shoot a few pictures of their adopted home.
We have a picture of the house. We have a picture of the mountain ranges where this house is located at, of a river that runs through their property. And then he took a picture of them.
I think that the boys wanted him to bring that picture back to the family.
He was telling my mom and them, he said, I just want y'all to know, they wanted me to tell you, do not worry about them. I have no doubt Fred Breezy was telling the truth. And I have photographs to prove what he said.
Breezy's tale is a bit much to take on face value, but testing the photos could verify its truth.
What I like is, obviously, he grew up with them. So he played with them as a kid. There's a long connective history there.
These photographs are promising, and I'd like to really look into this one some more. And is there a possibility I can get photocopies or photograph copies of each of these things, and that way I can also do my own research into it?
We would like to do everything with an independent group, just
Okay,
so
I
that we can
understand.
come back, and as this trust is being built between us.
I understand. I'm not doing anything on my investigation to violate that at all. Everything I'm doing is up and up and up in the front, so.
Well, what if I was to tell you that we got something to back those photographs up?
Okay, and anything you have would be wonderful.
The whole situation of it is, nobody positively, absolutely knows they're alive, really, but me. And I sat and talked with them. Yeah. I asked them, I said, how did you boys make the crossing? Neither one of them said anything, and I said, I know how you did it now. I said, I remember. Well, down here at the mouth of the Alcatraz, we go down there and take a rope and tie it around a rudder post, and we'd wait for the boat to pull on out, and we'd hold on to this rope and body surf. You're the first one, he says, has ever thought of it. He said, that's the way we came from.
Now, we
That's Mr.
need
Breezy.
to have this
Okay.
cleaned up a little bit,
Yeah.
but that's Fred Breezy.
Okay.
And it was recorded off of that tape recorder. That's my mom sitting right beside Breezy.
Both Dyke and Roderick realize the magnitude of the recording. Not only does it provide more context for the incredible photographs, but Breezy's story on tape seems to state that the Alcatraz escapees neither swam nor paddled off the island, but were, in fact, somehow towed to freedom.
Down here at the mouth of the Alcatraz, we go down there and take a rope and tie it around a rudder post, and we'd wait for the boat to pull on out, and we'd hold on to this rope and body surf. He said, that's the way we came from.
This here is something that I know I want to look into a lot more.
The new evidence the brothers have introduced are the first new leads since the escape.
The Breezy story is pretty incredible about how he just all of a sudden bumped into them down in Rio de Janeiro. But what led some credence to the story is the evidence that were provided in the form of the photographs. From this point on, we're going to have to really dive into Breezy's background and his connection to the family members.
Walking out of the office, David and Ken are certain of only one thing. Their Uncle Alfred will soon be lifted from the ground, a development that will not only help move the Alcatraz case forward, but will also solve a conspiracy the family insists was behind his death in 1964.
51 years, my grandfather wanted this done. He didn't have the ability to do it, and now the Marshal Services are offering to do it for us, and we're going to close that part of our case, which is really the family's case.
The wheels in motion thanks to their evidence. The brothers figure there's only one place they need to visit in San Francisco, the former temporary home of their uncles, Alcatraz Island. John and Clarence Anglin were Alcatraz inmates 1476 and 1485, respectively. But who were these men, and how did they get off the rock? Much of the ingenuity of their feat is credited to the third escapee, Frank Morris, whose IQ was apparently measured at 133, a figure that placed him in the top 3% of the population. And while the escape and its planning was a collective effort that included Morris, the Anglin boys played a central role in helping craft the plan.
That's one of the things that always makes me so mad. I hear all the stories about, oh, Frank Morris, you know, had a high IQ. He's the one who came up with this plan. And the Anglin brothers, they were dumb farm hicks with a third-grade education. They didn't know what they were doing, and I don't believe that for a moment.
Growing up, Mom said they could make anything out of nothing.
They were the MacGyvers of the 1950s.
Over the course of 15 months, the Anglins tapped into their resourcefulness, creatively assembling the assets they would need to escape Alcatraz undetected.
We've read in the files that 52 raincoats were missing. We know that Clarence knew how to stitch.
They made not only a boat out of it, but they also made life preservers.
They took up painting. They actually painted portraits of their girlfriends. Well, the only reason they did that, they needed flesh-colored paint to put on those dummy heads. Clarence took a job in the barber shop. He knew he needed hair. So he took hair and dropped it as he was cutting it, and it would fall down in his cuffs of his pants, and he walked it back to his cell.
To do all that under the noses of the guards? I mean, what else can you say about them? They were highly intelligent men.
By June 11th, 1962, with the holes in their cells cut and covered and a plan in place, it was only a matter of hours before the men made their break. What happened to them when they hit the water has been debated and theorized for half a century, with speculation on the escape continuing to this day. Michael Esslinger is currently working on a book about the escaped Anglins. He's joining their nephews, Ken and David, and former lead Alcatraz investigator Art Roderick for a trip to the Rock. As the ferry inches closer to Alcatraz Island, the weight of their current odyssey descends upon the brothers, and what their infamous uncles must have been thinking in 1960 as they prepared to be locked away in the harshest prison known to man.
I want the world to know that when they go out to Alcatraz and they walk around and they see the mugshots, they hear about the robbery, and they hear the stories about how they got out, I want them to know that these were more than criminals.
They wasn't murderers. You know, they robbed a bank with a toy gun. But what got them sent to Alcatraz is, hey, we can't keep these boys anywhere. Let's put them in Alcatraz. We can keep them there.
These were not totally bad people. They were human beings. They had a family. They had a mom and dad who loved them. They had brothers and sisters who cared about them. These were my uncles. And this is where they first made their first entry.
This is it.
Wow.
This was their first stop inside.
Wow.
And here we are.
Wow.
Yeah, so much blows me away.
always blows me away.
Well, this is where our whole life started with all the harassment, everything.
Yeah, this is where all of our lives got turned upside down. I mean, they left, and it affected all of us. Here it is.
This is Clarence's cell.
Wow. They left right through that hole.
Unbelievable. Just couldn't nothing hold them.
I just cannot believe they were actually in there.
You know, their beds were side by side, just a concrete wall separating them.
I bet it was good to be close to family.
Yeah, that was probably the only way they kept their sanity.
But you know, it didn't end here.
No.
No. I do not believe it ended here. It might have began here, but it didn't end here.
At approximately 9:30 p.m. on June 11th, 1962, just after the guards called for lights out, "15 months of meticulous preparation was finally put to the test." The three cons inched out of the backs of their cells through tiny holes that they had spent months cutting and concealing, made their way up the ventilator shaft and out onto the roof of the cell block. What they did next turned them into legends. David and Ken Widener are the nephews of two men who used to call these cells home: Alcatraz escapees John and Clarence Anglin. The brothers are shadowing the footsteps of their uncles as part of a fresh investigation into the escape. And the trip is rekindling a host of emotional childhood memories.
I remember my mom telling me the story. I was just a small kid, a baby, actually. And she said she heard it on the news that there had been an escape at the Alcatraz prison. She said she knew right then who it was.
It appears to be the first successful escape in the history of the maximum security prison.
And from that moment on, everything changed. I mean, it was in our blood from the very beginning.
As kids, we would hear our parents, when they'd get together, they would talk. And a lot of times when the kids would come around, they'd stop talking. And we know that they knew more than they were telling.
Coming from that background, it did make you want to go dig. It made you want to look past what some of the stories were and say, well, what caused that story to occur?
The brothers mined the family archive and found these photos. Two men in Brazil in 1975, whom they believe are John and Clarence Anglin. To try and find out what happened to their uncles, they've teamed up with former U.S. Marshal Art Roderick and historian Michael Esslinger.
Once they get out from the ventilator on top of the roof, they slowly started making their way across the top of the hospital to this side. One by one, they come down, which is a large smokestack that's no longer here, and they make their way down. So there's soot all over it, it's real dirty. You can actually see in a lot of the FBI photographs, sneaker prints leading away from the smokestack. They make their way out onto the officer's catwalk for the rent yard. go down into the vegetation here, and then walk right in front of the water tower. And made their way down this location here. It's amazing that right over here, this is what some of the FBI photos show.
So the Bureau found footprints, evidence that they came exactly this route.
They
then, huh?
did.
Oh, my gosh.
Well, your adrenaline would be pumping at this point because you're so close.
I mean, when you think about it, all the planning that went into getting to this point in the escape. You know, here they were carrying their raft, their life preserver, they had their paddles, their packs, the concertina to, you know, inflate everything. I mean, it's really amazing.
Wow. You could taste freedom from here.
You could.
Everybody knows how they got to the water. I want to know the details around how they got from that water all the way to land.
The main thing about Alcatraz, why everybody thought it was inescapable, was the water barrier. I mean, you're on an island, tides, cold water, swift currents, so that even if you got to the edge of the island, you would never make it to the mainland.
Them boys did not spend over a year planning this to get to the water and say, what do we do now? They knew all along what they were going to do. They had it planned out to a T.
With no definitive proof that the brothers lived or died, the truth remains elusive, and the possibilities have been hotly debated since 1962. The widely held assumption is that the men put a raft into the water and paddled into the abyss. But a re-examination of past interviews and documents, combined with the evidence the family has unearthed, has generated a shocking new theory.
Basically, what the theory is that rather than just get to the water's edge on the raft and then go out towards the Golden Gate, they actually went around the perimeter of the island.
There's an FBI document that indicates that when they were searching the island, they had actually brought bloodhounds on the island. And what they stated was that the bloodhounds actually made it to the cave, and that's where they lost the scent. The only true caves on Alcatraz are actually on the west side of the island near the incinerator.
Working their way around the island allowed the escapees to avoid the only active guard tower on Alcatraz, on the east side of the island. But even if the men made this full circle and landed at the prison's boat dock, the question still begs, how did they cross the bay? The answer may lie hidden within the maze of information collected by the authorities in the days following the escape. FBI records state that 120 feet of electrical cord that was stored near the boat dock was reported missing. A ferry would shuttle prison guards to and from the island. The last departure that night was at 12:10 a.m. When the feds studied the contents of each escapee's cell the morning after the escape, they found some telling evidence. On Frank Morris's desk were 3 magazines. One, a copy of Popular Mechanics, showing how to build a homemade raft. Another, a Sports Illustrated article, detailing how a boat enters and exits a slip, and how to tie and untie the boat from a dock. And the final magazine, left open by the inmate, a Miller High Life advertisement, showing a couple on a beach kicking back with a few beers. When deciphered from the maze of evidence, these facts, the electrical cord, the ferry schedule, and the magazines, reveal an intricate roadmap for the escapees once they make it to the boat dock.
The theory is that they came up right up under the dock here where the actual prison launch was sitting, and then they went underwater, tied the electrical cord to the cowling up by the rudder, and then fed this cord all the way around the dock. So that way, when the prison launch was coming out of the slip, they would actually be able to position the raft to where it would actually be towed right out as the boat took off towards the mainland.
The escapees could have known exactly when to be at the boat dock for their departure, used the instructions in the magazines, and tied the stolen electrical cord to the guard boat for their tow.
So they didn't swim, they didn't paddle. There was 3 boats leaving that island that night, and they caught a ride from one of them.
The theory continues that as the guard boat left the Alcatraz shoreline, the fugitives somehow untied the cord and paddled to a nearby getaway boat. Remarkably, there is a witness to this theory. A young San Francisco beat cop named Robert Checky told the FBI and the Oakland Tribune that he was smoking a cigarette at St. Francis Yacht Club after his shift when he looked out towards Alcatraz and saw something suspicious a couple hundred yards away in the water. Between him and Alcatraz Island, Checky noticed a pristine white boat in the bay with no fishing poles, sitting idle for 20 to 30 minutes before making its way towards the Golden Gate Bridge. In the frantic manhunt that followed the escape, the FBI dismissed his account out of hand. But if what he saw was tied to the prison break, it would mean that the escapees had received help from the outside.
I really believe that this is a game changer. It actually would bring them right to the very location that Officer Checky was in. You know, before it seemed so random and there was no possible way that they could have got to that area. But now when you put all of this together and you connect the dots, it actually would put them right in the same area that he witnessed that boat out on the bay that night.
This makes more sense than anything I've ever heard before.
If you take portions of what we got from Breezy, the alternative theory, the missing extension cord, that all kind of fits. And I think the clincher is Officer Checky's seeing the boat out there. And I've always looked at that newspaper article and read that interview and thought, wow, this is very compelling.
I actually think it changes all of the theories and makes it plausible. It makes it actually one of the most reasonable ways to get off the island, in my opinion.
But who would agree to provide such help? And who could the escapees truly trust to keep their plan close to the vest? Not only during the 15 months of planning, but for years after, as fugitives from the law. Roderick believes Anglin family friend Fred Breezy may have the answer.
The whole situation of it is, nobody positively, absolutely knows they're alive, really, but me. And I sat and talked with them. I asked him, I said, how did you boys make the crossing? Neither one of them said anything, and I said, I know how you did it now. I said, I remember. Well, down here at the mouth of the Alpine, we go down there and take a rope and tie it around a rudder post, and we wait for the boat to pull on out, and we hold on to this rope and body, sir. You're the first one, he says, that's ever thought of it. He said, that's the way we came from.
The search for the truth in the 1962 Alcatraz escape case is unfolding. A plausible new theory on how the escapees made their way to freedom has just been explored and is supported by evidence that was presented by the family of the escaped Anglins. Now, the nephews of John and Clarence are on their way back to Central Florida to follow an important, if painful, lead, exhuming another of their uncles, Alfred Anglin, whose corpse holds details that could solve the mysteries of the rock.
The only way that we're going to get to the bottom of this is to dig him up and find out what really happened to him.
It's going to be tough, you know, but I'm going to do it because, yes, we do have something to prove.
As the brothers make their way to the family plot in rural Ruskin, Art Roderick touches ground in Washington. The former lead investigator on the Alcatraz case is back in D.C., walking into a meeting with longtime cop Michael Streed, now one of the country's preeminent facial imaging experts.
I've got some photographs I'd like to show you. I'm hoping you can help me out on this. This picture of two individuals taken probably sometime in the mid-1970s. This picture is supposedly of John and Clarence Anglin. John being on your right, Clarence being on your left. Here is a mugshot of John from 1960, and then Clarence I also have some family photos in digital format that I can provide you.
All right.
This is probably the absolute best lead in this case since 1962. If you can come up with something where you see some similarity and there you with your investigative background would say, I would continue to investigate this particular lead, that's what I'm looking for.
Okay, so typically what we do is if they weren't wearing the glasses and stuff, you gotta measure interpupillary distance and, measure chin to mouth and do all the morphological measurements and such. This case, you don't have that, so it's more relying on a surface feature. What I'm going to have to do is scan them into the computer, take a look, and start doing some detailed analysis.
Okay, very good.
Back in Florida, a convoy is on the move, thanks to a deal the Widener brothers have struck with the U.S. Marshals Service. If the government helps to exhume their uncle Alfred and conducts an autopsy to once and for all determine his cause of death, the family will offer up a sample of Alfred's bone for forensic analysis.
We are fixing to go do something that's...
This is amazing.
It's going to be incredible.
It is amazing.
David and Ken's mother, Marie, along with their aunt Merle, are the younger sisters of John, Clarence, and Alfred.
Been a long time coming.
Well, it has.
You know, I asked my mom, is she prepared for Alfred coming out of the ground? And she is. Her and Merle, my Aunt Merle, they've both been waiting a long time for somebody to prove what they already know.
In 1958, Alfred Anglin, along with his soon-to-be infamous brothers John and Clarence, robbed a bank in Columbia, Alabama. The bank heist put each of the brothers behind bars. John and Clarence would eventually be sent to Alcatraz, while Alfred ultimately stayed in Alabama.
He ends up at Kilby Prison in September of 1963. When he arrives, he's actually already eligible for parole. So all he's got to do is just, a couple more years and he's going to get out of prison.
But in January of '64, after John and Clarence had already pulled off their mysterious escape from the Rock, Kilby Prison notified the Anglin family that Alfred had attempted a brazen escape of his own and died in the process.
Alfred, we are fixing to find the truth about you, honey.
We've always thought that they killed you.
That's right.
In Alabama.
And now we're about to find out.
Yes.
Amen.
Amen.
There's no way Uncle Alfred only had a few days left to come up for a parole hearing. There's no way he tried to escape. Never make me believe that. Sorry.
For the past 51 years, the Anglin clan has maintained that Alfred was beaten to death by prison authorities. After getting wind that his brothers made it safely off Alcatraz Island, the alleged beating, they believe, was due to refusing to share what he knew with Kilby officials.
I know that they made it. And I know that he knew they made it. And that's the reason why he was killed.
If the results come back that Alfred has broken bones, then Alabama's going to have to answer to what really happened to Alfred. How did he get broken bones when y'all claim he was electrocuted?
The official autopsy gives the marshals something they've long sought, a DNA sample from the Anglin family, to match up against the bones that washed ashore in San Francisco Bay 9 months after the escape.
Well, I want y'all to know it's been a long time coming.
Yeah, it has,
years.
David. It has.
51 years to solve this puzzle. And we are about to find out.
Ready?
as Alfred's coffin is raised. Roderick makes his way to official Marshal's headquarters, where he is learning more about the Anglin family friend who claims to have taken pictures of Alcatraz inmates John and Clarence Anglin in Brazil in 1975, 13 years after their escape.
Hey, how are you doing?
Henry, how are you, buddy?
Good to see you.
Chief Inspector Henry G. Berth is well aware of one of the agency's most notorious cold cases.
It seems like a pivotal person in this particular escape case is an individual by the name of Fred Breezy.
Breezy?
I don't know how it's spelt.
Okay.
The greatest thing I've got is just a picture of the individual, and that was probably taken around 1992. Now, he grew up with the Anglin brothers, all of them, and apparently he actually ran into them in the mid-'70s down in Brazil.
Oh, really?
Yes, and I was hoping possibly you could query the system and do a run on them and see what we got in the database on them.
I see you. I see you moving. He's moving.
Yes.
He's moving.
Here he comes.
Oh,
wow.
There he is.
Started right here.
Yep.
Started right here.
Yeah.
Been wanting to do this since you were 11 years old.
Wow. Yeah.
He said, Mom, I want to do this, but I don't know where to start.
Well, here we are.
Here we are.
I believe this is what Alfred wanted. He doesn't have a voice today. We're his voice.
Well, you just know that you and Mama would not leave this earth not knowing.
The brother of Alcatraz escapees John and Clarence Anglin is exhumed from the earth after 51 years underground. His dramatic resurrection and transport to the autopsy room is the result of an agreement the Anglin family has made with the U.S. Marshal Service. Help solve a family conspiracy theory related to Alfred's death by conducting an official autopsy on his corpse. And in exchange, the Anglins will provide a DNA sample from his remains to test against bones that washed up in San Francisco Bay 9 months after the 1962 escape.
I'm ready for some justice and some closure to this situation. And we are ready to learn the truth about what happened to my brother, Alfred.
They're opening the head. Right?
Okay. You know, it was really tense for me because there was some doubt that he might not even be in the casket, you know? Or was he going to be in good enough shape to do anything with?
Yeah, you're going to need it down here a little bit, too. Oh, yeah.
Oof. I was totally shocked. And I believe everybody else there was totally shocked at what they saw.
What I saw is imprinted in my head. I seen who I know was my Uncle Alfred.
Alfred Ray Anglin, brother to the Alcatraz escapees, well preserved after half a century underground.
Because he's in that good of a shape, we should be able to get the answer whether or not he was murdered.
Yeah.
And we can also use the DNA to prove those bones are not any of the Anglins.
Yeah. We're actually going to solve two different things here, one way or the other.
He's going to be the answer to two questions.
I did some digging, Fred Breezy, and I came up with a potential lead for you. His criminal history dates back to 1946.
Wow.
And involves a wide gamut of things, but primarily narcotics and weapons offenses.
In the mid-1970s, Fred Breezy was part of a smuggling ring, moving marijuana, cocaine, and hashish from South America and the Caribbean into Central Florida. In October of '76, with a plane laden full of drugs. Breezy and his companion were forced to crash land their prop plane in waters just outside of Ruskin, where they engaged in a shootout with local fishermen and were arrested for possession of $750,000 worth of drugs. Breezy was sentenced to 15 years behind bars. But it was many years before his criminal exploits began that ties Fred Breezy to the Alcatraz case, when he grew up in Ruskin, just down the street from the 14 siblings of the Anglin clan.
Yeah, he's got really quite an extensive record here. This is great stuff. Thank you. I appreciate it, buddy.
Do me a favor, keep me in the loop.
The preliminary information the active marshal provided is enough to pique the interest of Roderick. Fred Breezy was indeed a childhood friend of the Anglin brothers, had an extensive rap sheet, and, incredibly, was running drugs into Central Florida from somewhere in the Americas, even possibly from Brazil.
The Breezy story I find very interesting. What I find interesting about that, he was a pilot, and I think he was probably concerned about what would happen if he openly said he was involved in this escape. My thought is he more than likely assisted them in the escape. If those two individuals are in Brazil, then more than likely he helped them get there.
With the new information on Breezy, Roderick heads to Reagan National for the flight to Central Florida, and the very likely possibility that tomorrow's autopsy of an Anglin brother may finally solve the mystery of the 1962 Alcatraz escape. Laying on a gurney at a funeral home in Hillsborough County, Florida, is the corpse of Alfred Anglin. He's the brother to Alcatraz escapees John and Clarence Anglin, and he and the secrets he carries have just been unearthed after more than half a century underground. Official Alabama prison records state Alfred was electrocuted to death upon attempting an escape from Kilby Prison in 1964. But the Anglin family has long suspected a government cover-up, believing Alfred was murdered by prison guards for refusing to share inside information he had about his brother's escape from Alcatraz.
Having Alfred exhumed takes care of the issue that the family has that Alfred was beat to death for having information that related to the brother's escape, but also it gives us a clean DNA sample for us.
Art Roderick is a retired United States Marshal and has just arrived at the autopsy room from Washington. He's acting as a liaison between the marshals and the family of the escaped Anglin brothers, who have struck a once unthinkable agreement. The marshals will perform an autopsy on the corpse of Alfred Anglin to definitively determine his cause of death. And in return, the Anglins are providing a DNA sample from Alfred's bone to be tested against the DNA of bones that washed ashore in San Francisco Bay 9 months after the escape.
Exhuming Alfred, I mean, that is so big. I mean, that's everything. You know, if we're able to test the DNA and figure out that, you know, those bones belong to one of the brothers, we solve one of the greatest mysteries from the 20th century.
For the Anglin family, who believe the men made it across the water, learning the truth about Alfred and being able to share that story with the world is one of the main reasons to finally work with the authorities.
I guarantee you could ask anyone today and no one would know anything about Alfred Anglin. And so to me, when we reached out to Art, it was not only a way to say, we know where they're at and we're going to help you find them, but it was also a way to give a voice to another brother that everybody simply forgot.
Yeah, let's see.
Despite his time underground, Alfred's coffin was almost perfectly sealed, preserving the body better than anyone had expected.
Now, what we're all gonna need to do, everyone in the room, while she's shooting these, we have to be out.
Dan Schultz is a noted pathologist and medical examiner and has been in practice for over 30 years. His first step before doing anything else to the corpse is to order a full-body X-ray, which will be used to determine if the family's suspicions of foul play are justified.
X-ray.
Nice. Wow. 51 years.
Amazing, isn't it?
Isn't that amazing?
The family gets hung up on the inconsistencies as to whether there was an autopsy or not. But the real evidence is going to be, what does the body look like? Does the body look like it went through electrocution, or did it go through a beating? That's the bottom line.
So we're gonna just cut up the middle and just take a look at what it looks like there.
With the x-rays complete, pathologist Dan Schultz can begin his autopsy and the extraction of bone for DNA sampling.
So you are gonna hold the bone down fixed. And I'm gonna cut a segment. This is mid-shaft of the femur. In order to collect DNA, we took 2 samples. We took a sample about 7 centimeters long from each femur, which is the best media for good identification. And that's packaged up and will be sent to a laboratory.
The lab results will have far-reaching consequences. If the DNA samples are a match, it would mean that one of the Anglin brothers died in the frigid waters after escaping from the rock. And the photo that the family believes is John and Clarence Anglin in Brazil in 1975 is a complete fraud. But if the DNA doesn't match, the only remaining lead in this 53-year-old case is that photo.
At the end of the day, we can come up with every theory in the world, but right now, there's nothing other than this photograph to show that they made it out.
Roderick makes his way back to Washington, D.C., and heads straight for Michael Street. The facial imaging expert is in the middle of a detailed analysis of the photo, allegedly from Brazil, to determine whether the 2 men in the picture from 1975 could be Alcatraz escapees John and Clarence Anglin.
I think everybody who does some sort of forensic analysis doesn't want to be wrong. And I don't think in a case like this that you can be wrong because it's not a positive ID science. But I think the enormity of it for me was not wasting people's time, not getting the family's hopes up or getting law enforcement hopes up that they would still be there, because they would have to provide a tremendous amount of resources to reopening the case. So I took the photos that you provided, and I went in and scanned them in the computer. And so what we like to do is we want to compare them together. And the first thing on both pictures, but especially on this one, is the forehead. Mm-hmm. The height and the shape of the forehead, as well as the frontal bone there. If you look near the arrow there, that depression in both, that's bone structure.
The forehead just blows me away, how similar the forehead is.
Well, you can see the brow. That sharp downward turn in the brow is what does it for me. If you look at the ear outline as well, and we'll go ahead and show you the ear overlay. Let's see how it matches up to the tracing and the ear.
Wow.
Look at that. It fits. Let's just go ahead and...
It does.
And if you just toggle in and toggle off, that opening matches.
It's evident. You can't discount it. I mean, it really is like he's wearing the mask. To me, that matches up.
The nose, the hairline, the jawline.
I'm listening to every word you say, but my mind is going 100 miles an hour here trying to figure out what we do next. I just never expected this.
As a former detective and, as a forensic artist, but mostly as a detective, my gut instinct as a police officer would be to round up the posse.
I can't believe this.
For over 50 years, the mysteries surrounding the Alcatraz escape have both confounded authorities and mesmerized the public. 3 fugitives, brothers John and Clarence Anglin, along with Frank Morris, escaped from the rock, stepped into frigid waters, and, having never been found, secured a mythical place in American history.
The main reason why Alcatraz Island still captivates everyone is because these 3 individuals did the unimaginable. It was really the great escape.
Art Roderick is a retired United States Marshal, and for the past few months has been working with the family of the escaped Anglin brothers to pursue fresh leads in the case, thanks to shocking new evidence introduced by the family members themselves.
Nobody positively, absolutely knows they're alive, really, but me.
In his possession, Roderick now holds the final results of all aspects of their current investigation. And he's in Leesburg, Georgia, to deliver the news in person.
What I'm getting ready to tell the family about what we found and the evidence that they gave me is going to move the needle on this case.
For the Anglin family, the potentially historic news the lawman is about to share is less about American history and more about their own personal history. Finding out what happened to 3 beloved family members.
You know, it's more than a TV show for us. This is personal. This is real life for us. I mean, we live this every single day.
Art, how you doing? How's it going?
Good, good.
Marie?
Hey, Art.
Good to see you.
How you doing, buddy?
Good, man. Well, we got a lot of stuff to go over. I think we should probably get to it.
I'm ready for it.
Ready? Okay.
Absolutely ready. Let's go. We've been waiting a long time.
Oh, I know.
My nerves were going crazy. I knew that I wasn't sure exactly what it was, but I knew that it was going to be big.
Well, first, Marie, Ken, and David, I want to thank you all for inviting me along on this journey. Having said that, you provided quite a bit of information. Let's start with the first thing you gave me, which was the Christmas cards. It was very difficult to confirm what year those cards were made. And as far as being able to confirm that it's actual evidence that they made it out, the Christmas cards really don't provide that type of information, okay?
That was strike one for me. I was like, okay, you know, now he's bringing out the results for Alfred.
The second item is near and dear to your family, and it concerns Alfred's death, right. Okay? Allowing us to exhume Alfred's body. Obviously, that served a dual purpose. Number one, you as the family wanted to find out if there was any evidence as to how he passed away. From the Marshal Service perspective, you know, we wanted to get a DNA sample to compare it to the remains that were found in San Francisco Bay. We were actually able to do both those things. The medical examiner provided us a report. Basically what he did is he did a regular autopsy there, okay? But they also did a head-to-foot x-ray. And I've got copies of this here. And so this is exactly what they did to determine, you know, if there could be any possible trauma to the bones. And the bottom line is, when he did the complete medical examination, they could find no trauma to any of the bones.
That was strike two for me. I was like, man, you know, it was just a downer, another downer.
When you look at all the evidence around Alfred's death, it makes no sense whatsoever.
Yes, it was definitely one of the things we needed to know.
Right.
Yeah, we really appreciate you doing this.
No, you know, we're doing this together. Obviously, right. We wouldn't be at this point without your help, and that's the key thing to this case right now. Right. I think we all want a resolution one way or the other.
Christmas cards come back as a strike. The autopsy come back on Alfred, you know, that there was no blunt force trauma, strike two. This DNA we really needed to be right. This could not be strike three for us.
We were able to take 2 7mm samples from Alfred's femur bone, which the Marshal Service requested, to be able to compare Alfred's DNA profile with a profile that was of the remains that were found in San Francisco Bay. We then sent it off to a forensic anthropologist, and they were able to actually come up with a comparison between Alfred's DNA and the DNA that was located in San Francisco Bay.
Unrelated.
I knew it.
Wasn't his bones.
I knew it.
I knew
it.
Awesome. I knew it wasn't there.
I had no doubt
that was not them.
It's not even close.
Not even close.
I think it's like 9,200 to 1, so it's way out there.
I knew it.
That's exactly what I wanted to hear.
I knew it.
That was big for me.
This proved it is not them. 100% proof.
Well, I'm not done yet. As you recall, when you shared this information with me initially, I was pretty excited about this last piece of information. And this is the picture of who you believe are John and Clarence Anglin. I told you, I think at that point, exactly what I was going to do. We went to a very well-known forensic artist, and he gave me his initial impression and then did a full-blown, actually walked me through the whole process of how he was able to do the comparison, and his conclusion was actually pretty simple. He said that it's highly likely that the two individuals in that 1975 photograph are John and Clarence Anglin.
I knew it. Boy, you just give me chills. I knew it was him.
I know. I told you.
Now, again, they're never going to give you 100%.
Right.
But
hey, that's close enough for me, buddy.
Jeez.
That's close enough for me.
I asked him the question, if this was you and you were in my place as an investigator, what would you do? And he basically said, I would round up the posse.
Oh,
my God.
Man.
This is it.
I knew in my heart that it was them. I wanted science to kind of back it up. This is a new chapter that's about to be written, and we're going to be part of that chapter.
I can't wait till the world hears this.
So now that you have that from the guy who looked at these photographs, what do you believe?
Well, I'm changing my mind based on the photograph, which I think I told you that the photograph to me was the most convincing thing. Obviously, this is a complete game changer in this case, okay? Obviously, the DNA coupled...
Sorry.
No, that's fine. Listen, I was bowled over myself, so have at it.
The family does feel vindicated about everything that we found. Mainly because we now can prove to the world that those boys did not drown in that water. And that photo is actually the only piece of evidence that proves that they made it.
I'm very lucky to be sitting here now, and in this very short period of time, have brought this case to this point where I truly believe we're going to close it.